Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that you already know by now that 150 RPM hand cannons are being moved to 140 in Beyond Light. There are two exotic hand cannons that have consistently been at the top of the pack in PvP usage. The first belonging to one of the most beloved heroes in the history of Destiny, Cayde 6. And the other belonging to one of the most heinous villains in the lore of the game, Dredgen Yor. So it comes as no surprise that the two hand cannons we're talking about are Ace of Spades and Thorn. Ace has been heralded by many as the one 140 RPM hand cannon that could truly compete with the 150s in PvP. While Thorn carries with it damage output that cannot be denied. But with Thorn being shifted to a 140 RPM hand cannon in Beyond Light, is that extra damage per shot gonna make it the clear frontrunner? Or will the changes that are about to go into effect level out the hand cannon playing field to the point where Ace will emerge as the premier exotic hand cannon? I'm gonna do my best to answer that question in this video, but there's two things you must keep in mind. First, we won't know the full story until we actually get our hands on these changes. And second, how good a weapon is can be very subjective. A player's personal preference can really factor into what makes a weapon good. But as always, I'll try to be as objective as possible when looking at these two weapons. And if at any point during the course of this video you find it useful, helpful, or enjoyable, liking and subscribing really help this channel out and let me know that you'd like to see more content like this in Beyond Light. So to pit these two weapons against each other, we'll compare the base stats. Then we'll take a look at each weapon's damage output, adjusting Thorn's damage for future values. Next, we'll look at each weapon's utility, and lastly, we'll roll it all together and take a look at each weapon's performance in-game. And maybe after that, we can find a clear-cut winner. Or maybe not. But without further ado, let's get into it. For the stats, we'll take a look at both weapons side by side, and I'll pull up some actual numbers from white.gg for this one so we're not squinting at bars on the screen. And hopefully everyone can see that. Let me just zoom it in. Okay, that should be better. We're gonna start with the range since impact is a non-factor in PvP. And the range stat goes to Ace by a 37-point margin. And while the physical range of the weapon is more or less tuned within the weapon class, this stat can make shots fired from the weapon more accurate. But Thorn is the more stable weapon by 14 points, and it also carries more agility, besting Ace by 22 points in the handling department. The reload speed technically goes to Thorn, but only by a negligible amount. And these weapons' RPMs will be equalized in Beyond Light. Ace can carry 13 rounds in the magazine as opposed to Thorn's 9, which isn't displaying correctly in this item comparer. But Ace will fire 4 more times than Thorn without reloading. But Thorn does have the better aim assist value, which adds bullet magnetism or reticle stickiness depending on your platform. And while the range stat and the aim assist stat do work in tandem to determine how consistently shots land, for simplicity's sake I'm counting them as two separate entities in this review. Then looking down at the perks, aside from each weapon's intrinsic abilities, the only one that is not factored into the stats already is high caliber rounds on Ace of Spades, giving Ace the ability to better flinch targets. So on paper, Ace wins out in 3 categories, and Thorn has the advantage in 3 categories. You may personally value one aspect over another, but when looking at the stats alone, this is gonna be a push. But on to our damage output and TTK values. Alright, in this section we'll take a look at Ace of Spades damage output first, which should be unchanged. So Ace will hit for 70 points of damage on a crit and 47 points of damage to the body at base. The optimal time to kill here is going to be 0.87 seconds by landing 3 crits, and the body shot time to kill comes in at 1.73 seconds with 5 shots landed. With the Memento Mori damage buff, Ace hits for 90 points of damage on a crit and 60 points of damage to the body. So the optimal time to kill remains at 0.87 seconds, but can down a Guardian in 1 crit and 2 bodies. And the body shot time to kill will come in at just under 1.3 seconds, with 4 shots landed, requiring 1 less bullet. Next for Thorn, who should be seeing a damage increase in Beyond Light, while seeing a rate of fire reduction. And unless Bungie decides to individually tune Thorn's damage, these numbers should be accurate. Quick note here, Thorn does have damage over time, and even though this is showing as 2 and 7 on screen, I found the true values to be 1.1 and 6.9 when the Soul Devourer damage buff is active. And I am going to be treating the damage over time as if it were raw damage. So since Thorn should be hitting for 2 more points of damage per bullet, the adjusted numbers will hit for 74.4 on a crit and 51.4 to the body. This is going to allow Thorn to hit its optimal time to kill of 0.87 seconds by landing 2 crits and 1 body shot. And the body shot time to kill at base should come in at 1.29 seconds, requiring only 4 shots landed. Now Bungie could block this with specified weapon tuning, but from the information we have currently, the math checks out. Now when the Soul Devour damage buff is procced, I'm figuring the burn damage to increase to 6.9 damage per tick. Currently, Thorn's outputting 95.6 damage per bullet, allowing it to 2-tap Guardians with 5 resilience or less. After Beyond Light, Thorn's damage will increase to 97.6 when buffed, allowing it to down Guardians running 7 resilience or less with 2 crits in 0.43 seconds. And when buffed, the body shot damage should be coming in at 74.6 damage per shot, allowing a non-critical 3-tap on Guardians of any resilience in 0.87 seconds. So when looking solely at the damage output, Thorn bests Ace in a multitude of different ways due to the burn damage that is being applied at base and when each weapon has its respective buff active. So in respect to damage output and time to kill values, Thorn gets to win. But how about each weapon's utility? For utility, we'll start off taking a look at Thorn in this one. While Thorn's biggest upside lies in sheer damage, it does have some additional benefits. First off, rounds fired from Thorn do carry the ability to over-penetrate targets. So if 2 enemies are lined up for you, the bullet will pass through the initial target and deal full damage to the secondary target. This also applies the burn effect to both targets. On a kill, the remnant left behind is not only the source of the damage buff, but it also feeds a few bullets back into the magazine. So we do have a loose form of ammo regenning capability. Then our damage over time provides additional information on a player's movement after they are struck by a shot. Now this is a short window, but you'll be able to tell if a player just slipped around the corner and is trying to bait you in, or if they made a full break for it. You can do this simply by watching the spacing and the direction on the damage ticks. With Ace of Spades, we also see numerous benefits aside from the damage buff. Through the Firefly perk, targets will explode in solar damage when downed by a precision shot, allowing for some collateral damage on any other targets that are in the area. But the Firefly perk also functions in the same way that Outlaw does. So you're going to have an extremely fast reload after a precision kill. We also have the aforementioned high caliber rounds, which adds additional flinch to targets on landed shots. Then through the intrinsic trait, we have active radar at all times, in the same way that Mida does. So even when aiming down sights, our radar will remain up, giving you the ability to keep an eye on your surroundings in the middle of a gunfight. But then where Thorn does not have a catalyst, Ace of Spades does, which increases the damage on the Firefly perk. But more importantly, it gives Ace the ability to generate orbs of light on a multi-kill. This is increasingly valuable due to the presence of the Charge with Light system. So when looking at the general utility that each weapon provides, I would say that Ace is the outright winner here. Alright, when comparing these 2 hand cannons against each other performance-wise, this is where things can start to get a little more subjective, because each person can value a different aspect of a weapon over another. But the first thing I want to touch on is the acquisition and function of each weapon's damage buff. With Thorn, you must first secure a kill, then physically pick up the Remnant to get your Soul Devourer damage buff. Once this buff is acquired, you will have a very short 7-second window to make the most of it. With Ace and the Memento Mori damage buff, all you need to do is secure a kill and then reload your weapon. So you don't need to potentially put yourself in harm's way to increase your damage like you may need to do with Thorn. And once Ace's buff is active, you can hold these 6 bonus damage rounds for as long as you would like. They will disappear if you swap weapons or pull out your Ghost, but we do not have a timer on them. Then I've heard many people say that they don't prefer to use Thorn because the gun looks a little chunky on screen, or they don't like the sights, or the shots just don't seem to register consistently. I can't say that I personally share this opinion, but never once have I heard anyone say this about Ace. Not one single time. Ace feels like one of the most accurate, reliable, and consistent hand cannons in the game, especially from mid-range. Plus it has a very clean, streamlined weapon frame, and a nice practical sight on it. But Thorn definitely is the more agile of the 2 weapons. Not because of the fire rate, because these guns are about to be on level footing, but the high handling stat makes swapping between weapons and aiming down sights feel much more fluid than it does with Ace. And while Ace is very consistent, it always seemed to feel a little bit heavy and less responsive. So for an aggressive player, Thorn might be the better fit. And another thing that has always bugged me about Ace is the weapon's recoil pattern. Even though both weapons have a 100 in the recoil direction, I feel like Ace tends to walk around a little bit more than it should. Now this isn't really a problem if you're timing out your shots, but when you're using the weapon at its max fire rate, the grouping is not the prettiest. With Thorn, even when spam firing the weapon, we see very little side to side deviation. The shots are spaced out a little bit more because Thorn currently has a higher fire rate, but vertical recoil can be far easier to manage than bullet deviation. And keep in mind that this pattern is probably going to tighten up a little bit when Thorn begins firing at 140 rounds per minute. But the last thing to look at in a weapon's performance is its lethality. One of the biggest advantages you can have in PvP is flat out being able to down your opponent quicker than they can down you. And in this aspect, Thorn is just too strong to ignore. At base, it can down a Guardian with 2 crits and 1 body shot, something you can't pull off with any other hand cannon outside of the aggressive frames. Then in Beyond Light, 4 body shots should be lethal. Here again, something no other hand cannon can pull off at base outside of the aggressive frames. Then when buffed, we're going to be downing Guardians at any resilience level with 3 body shots, and downing Guardians at most resilience levels with 2 crits. With Ace and the Momentum Worry perk, it does offer a more friendly bullet combination to deal lethal damage in 0.87 seconds. And it does drop Ace's body shot time to kill by only requiring 4 bullets. But it just doesn't keep pace with the damage output or time to kill values that Thorn can hit in the Crucible. So for overall performance, while it's a tight race, I think I have to give it to Thorn. So for the verdict, both are truly amazing hand cannons, and both will certainly have a place in the upcoming sandbox. But when everything is broken down and laid out, Thorn comes out on top generally speaking. And there are definitely scenarios where Ace is going to be the better weapon, and for certain players, Ace might fit their game plan and playstyle much better than Thorn does. But Thorn just has the ability to overpower many situations, and does things that other hand cannons just aren't capable of. So when Beyond Light drops in just a few short days, Thorn could be a very powerful weapon to be wielding, or a very scary gun to be squaring off against in the Crucible. And let me just end it by saying, you're not wrong if you like one gun over the other. But I've been asked numerous times, what's the better hand cannon, Thorn or Ace? And rather than trying to keyboard it out in the comment section, I figured I'd make a video about it. And this is what I've come up with. But feel free to disagree with my final assessment. I'd love to talk about it in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please remember to leave it a like and subscribe to the Ironworker Gaming channel if you've not done so already. Both really go a long way in helping the channel out, and we're going to be doing a lot more weapon reviews as we move through Beyond Light. If you'd like to catch me live, you can look for Ironworker814 on Twitch, drop me a follow and you'll get notified whenever I hop on. And if you'd like to contact me, the best way is simply to comment down below. I'll be sure to get back to you. And with all that being said, I'd like to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out this weapon review. You guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.